Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you might be in this wonderful world of ours, and welcome to In the Spotlight with me, your hostess with the mostest, Seamus Corry, wellbeing consultant and mental health practitioner. It's wonderful to have you along today to listen to this episode, wherever you might be in this wonderful world of ours. And I want to appreciate and send gratitude to all of you who continue to subscribe to my channel, both on YouTube and Spotify. Continue to follow all my exploits and journeys as I journey through this podcast series. But also, I really do appreciate your comments on the episodes, and please continue to leave them, because it's through your comments and with your feedback that I'm able to produce the content I'm able to produce. So I really appreciate your comments. So comment underneath in terms of the comment section, in terms of YouTube and Spotify, and I look forward to hearing your comments and getting all your feedback back. If you've not already subscribed and if you've not already followed, I would really invite you to do so. Tell your friends to do so, tell your family to do so. Let's share this message far and wide with the world, this positive message of hope and success and well-being and positive mental health with the world. I think it needs it more now than ever. So please follow and subscribe and ask your friends to do the same. You won't want to miss today's episode. And I'm delighted and honoured and humbled to have an individual who I first met some weeks ago through the Founders Network, and a big high five, high 10 to Rudy and Albert from the Founders Network who brought us together. And this individual, this person, this wonderful human being is a founder, is a mum, is a founder of her own business called In Spirit Diet. And she has a website to that effect. She's a former health clinician. She is a wonderful individual and really passionate and motivated to support people feel well, be well, and continue to feel well for the rest of their lives. I'm delighted, honoured, and privileged to have in my podcast episode this afternoon the one and the only Fiona Brannigan. Fiona, it's so wonderful to have you along today. Welcome to In the Spotlight, and how are you this afternoon?
I'm really well, thank you. And my head's just grown about 5 sizes for that lovely introduction. So thanks ever so much, Seamus. That's really kind of you. But yeah, I'm glad it's Friday. I've got an epic weekend lined up. I'm on a big road trip this weekend with my daughter with her musical exploits. So yeah, it's a nice way to finish up what's been a really good working week. Thanks.
Lovely, lovely. And as I say, you and I first met some weeks ago through the connection we both made with the Founders Network, the fastest growing network this side of the Western Hemisphere. And it's wonderful, and I think you would agree with me. It's wonderful to have connected on that network, to meet such like-minded individuals in similar positions like yourself and myself, who are both founders, who both got their own businesses, who are both solo entrepreneurs in terms of the marketplace. And I'm always keen to connect with wonderful individuals like yourself. And for those who don't know you, I know a little bit, but for those who don't know you, Fiona, tell us who is Fiona Brannigan and what is In Spirit Diet all about?
Yep. Okay, doke. So I'm a dietitian, and I took a really traditional path to becoming a dietitian. I left school at 17, went off to university, did my 4 years there, and then started working in the NHS and continued through the ranks. Got to a band 7 position, which is really kind of clinical specialist. And my kind of speciality is older adults. So basically people over 50 and it's just a population group that it's just a population group that I love to work with. I just really enjoy them. Primarily over 65s, but over 50s is a kind of a catch-all because it also uncovers some people do have been to develop long-term conditions by the time they get to the kind of mid-50s. So that's that. So I had a, usual thing, uni, job, met a boy, got married, had a kid, and life continued quite happily. And then had COVID in 2020, which was a horrible time to work in the NHS. And although I wasn't based within a hospital environment, I haven't actually worked in a hospital since 2003. I was out in the community. Yeah, that was just a really horrible time for everybody. And the NHS, it was pretty nasty. So that was all fine, got through that. And then my daughter became unwell in 2021.
Mm.
And she had a really rare condition called complex regional pain syndrome, which um, not many people have heard about. It tends to happen in older women, kind of sort of like 50s, 60s plus. And basically, it's when your kind of nervous system, your pain system goes a bit skew-iffy and a bit into overdrive, and everything causes you tremendous pain. So even touching your skin, wearing clothes, the wind, water. So our lives at that point kind of stopped, and my daughter wasn't really able to attend school. She missed most of primary seven. Um, but she got better, which was amazing. Had a really horrible experience at the hands of the NHS, which has tainted my view of them somewhat, I have to say, for an organisation that I absolutely loved before. Yeah, it was pretty horrible, and it was actually hypnotherapy that got her better, not anything that the
Oh,
NHS, yeah, not anything that the NHS recommended. But she got better, and it was amazing. But I'd taken a career break at that point, and you don't go through something that's so challenging. You come out of it changed. Um, and I was just so full of gratitude because she'd basically been written off, and I was told that this could probably be her life going forward. And to look at your child at that point, she was 12, going into secondary school, and look at her thinking, no, this isn't going to be the life for my child. But she got better. It was amazing. So my husband and I had made a decision at that point that I wasn't going to return to my job in the NHS. I was thinking about doing something different, didn't know where to go. So I gave up my senior position in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, which is, I believe, the biggest health board in the UK, certainly in Scotland anyway, but I think it's also the UK, and embarked on this new life of being a full-time wife and mum. I loved it. And then 6 weeks later, my husband told me that our marriage was over. I had no job, I had no income, I had no nothing. And I was angry. I was a good Scottish face, absolutely raging. I was so angry. And I began looking at returning to the NHS, but financially, where the banding I was at, my job had been taken for cost cuts, for cost savings.
mm,
And there really isn't many band seven jobs going. And the fact was, the truth of the matter was, I was £800 a month in the bank less, going from the top of a seven to the bottom of a six, which is where I'd had to have started. So I thought to myself, fueled by optimism and anger, I thought to myself, I'm going to set up my own practice because surely it can't be that difficult to run your own business. They'll be battering down the doors. I'll offer weekend appointments with my daughters with their dad. I'll offer evening appointments, and I'll be beating them off with a stick. And that's how I started off. And I genuinely believe if I didn't have that optimistic nature and also fueled by utter fire of, I'll show you, I don't think I would ever have set up my own business. And that was coming up for, I've just been just under 2 years in business now.
wow.
And I've learned a lot. And it's really hard to go back to the beginning because when you're at the top of your game professionally, and then you go back to having a business that you know nothing about. You have no business training, no business qualifications, no nothing. You don't know about, leads and sales funnels and, how people buy. And yeah, so it's been, as well as dealing with, looking after my daughter, making sure she's okay, and also navigating a divorce and co-parenting and all those bits that come with it. So yeah, it's been an eventful 2 years, that's for sure.
Wow, thank you for sharing all that, Fiona. And what a journey you've been on. What an absolute journey you've been on, from the permanency of your role within the NHS to to looking after your daughter. And I'm so glad and grateful that she's now fully restored and well. Ironically, as a result of holistic therapy rather than anything that the NHS could provide, which is something we might come back to. And then to have your own personal experiences of sadly your marriage breaking down, and using that. And I think we have all found ourselves in positions where we can let the anger overtake us, and we can succumb to that, and we can go on that downward spiral, or we can decide and we can make that choice to do something different, and almost like fuck you. I'm sorry for swearing, but it's just that kind of attitude. It's like you're sticking the finger up and going, do you know what? I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make something of this, right? I'm going to rescue something from this. And hats off to you in terms of, building a business over 2 years, and under really difficult, probably circumstances. Notwithstanding the fact that you experienced some horrendous difficulties during COVID and the period of the pandemic. I can't even imagine what it was like to work in the NHS at that time. And again, investigations are ongoing, and inquests are ongoing, and reviews are ongoing in terms of how well or how badly it was managed. But we all have our own experiences and viewpoint on that, and it must have been an horrendous time for you during the pandemic. It must have been really challenging being in the NHS at that time, was it, Fiona?
Yeah, well, I guess so. I worked in a rehab team in Glasgow, so
Mm,
we weren't, for a start, we never ever thought the NHS was gonna shut, and I know it didn't shut, but the types of services that I worked in,
mm,
um, we were based out in the community. We weren't necessarily considered frontline, but we had nurses and we had physios, and we knew quite early on from kind of stuff coming in from Italy that nurses and physios were going to be really important because of the kind of respiratory problems that COVID was bringing us. But we genuinely thought 6 weeks and we'll be done. We never thought it was going to be this massive thing.
yeah.
And what basically happened is one day we were based within a social work building. A social work just decided to close the building, and we had hours to get stuff out. And because I was a dietitian, I was kind of, and I wasn't in a hospital, I was kind of not left. That's not fair. I turned up for work every single day, but my job had changed. So part of my role when I worked in the rehab team is I used to assess people in terms of their ability to, for getting discharged from hospital or remaining at home being safe. So I had a kind of extended scope of practice that most dietitians don't really have. So you're able to assess mobility, recommend equipment, that kind of thing. So you were taking out equipment to people who, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this, older people that weren't given the opportunity to go to hospital.
Okay.
Um, and you probably didn't really realize the implications of that in terms of, you were in houses with these people that were coughing and coughing and coughing. And didn't really think, I just didn't really think too much about it, because I think I think certainly I consider myself a bit of a maverick. You're a bit immune to stuff because you'd had at that point, I'd had a 20-year career in the NHS. I didn't really get ill very often.
Mm,
And I never actually caught COVID at that point. But you were then, so part of my job was calling people to see how they were. And there was people that were at home with elderly relatives, they'd moved in with them to care for them. And you could see the trajectory of how it was going, because they were saying to you, they're not so good today, they're not so good today, they're not so good today. And then they would say, oh, they're much better today, they're much better today. They're eating a bit more, they're doing whatever. And then you knew what was coming, because I think if you ask anyone that works in healthcare, you people that are very unwell, and then they kind of rally for a day or two.
mm,
And then you very much knew the next day when you called, the word you would get would be that that person had passed away.
yeah.
And yeah, you knew that. And then when things kind of, got, I say a little bit more organized, is maybe that's an unfair statement, but because, I think it was maybe a little bit more organized, you were then beginning to go back out to see people. So you were coming home, being in houses of people that were COVID positive, and, stripping off, or changing before you got home, put stuff in the washing machine, and you were very then conscious, we were beginning to see the first people that were coming out of hospital and how massive the impact of COVID was on them. And then you felt really terrible because you put your family at risk,
Yeah,
by going out every day to help other people. Yeah, so it was. And I think we now know, I think everyone did the best they could at that time. No
absolutely.
matter who it was. I think they absolutely, hopefully we'll never see anything like it again. But hopefully if we do, we've maybe learned some lessons. But yeah, categorically, there were some people that were never given the option of getting better from COVID.
Yeah. Where do you get your spirit of resilience from, Fiona?
No idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've no idea. I think,
You're a fighter, right? You're a fighter.
yeah, so I think I was brought up. So yeah, my father died when I was 8.
Mm.
Um, he died unexpectedly. My mum was 36. He was 42. Um, and I think, looking back, my mum always said to me, there's no such word as can't.
Yeah.
If you want to, you will find a way. And she very much brought me up to be really independent and not ask for help. And I think there's an element of that not asking for help's not always the best way to be, though. Sometimes you need help and you need to reach out for that help. Um, but I think undoubtedly the hardest thing I've ever been through was caring for my daughter that was unwell. And
Yeah.
part of that therapy that the NHS wanted us to do, that we had to do I had to do every single day with her, was touch her. So CRPS, they say it's the worst pain that a human will endure, worse than amputation pain, way worse than labour pains for any of the ladies out there that are listening. And I had to inflict that pain on my daughter every single day. And that was hard going. And we had psychology input from the NHS, and one of the things that they'd recommended to us to do, which I did, I, I don't think my ex-husband did it, but I did it every single day, was no matter what day you've had before you go to your bed at night, write down 3 things that have been good.
Yeah.
And that gratitude practice, which still continues today, you know, in my life, is just every single day, no matter how crappy or shitty your day's been.
Mm.
There's always been something, even if it's something simple like I got to drink a hot cup of coffee today, or I got to take the dog for a walk and it didn't rain, do you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I did a load
Absolutely.
of washing and I put it away. Do you know? There's always something. There's
Absolutely.
always something in every day, no matter how dark it is. You've just got to look, and some days it's really hard to find it, but you've just got to keep looking for it.
Yeah, and it's so true, Fiona, what you say that if you look for it, it will be there. Sometimes you got to rake through a pile of peat really in order to get it, but it will be there, right? It will be there, and the more we find the little nuggets in our day and start collecting the nuggets, the more they become visible to us as we go on through the day.
I know it sounds really cliched, but it's so true.
It is true. It is true. And if you develop a practice of gratitude, each day they say that developing a practice of gratitude in terms of wellness is one of the best things you can do. It reduces stress, it improves your serotonin level, and it increases your metabolism to look on the world with a little bit more hope and look on the world a little more brighter. So, even that one practice alone can do so much for us, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, and even dare I say it, physically in terms of a life, right? Um,
Absolutely.
in terms of your work, I know you've said you specify the over 50s population. Why the over 50s, Fiona?
Oh, do you know, a lot of people ask that. I think when I first qualified, I really loved the kind of, now I'm going, when I qualified, I was 21. So, at that point, 50 plus seemed ancient, as it does. But I loved going to they were called well, they were called geriatric wards in those days.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, geriatric wards.
Thanks for that. Thanks for
And
that.
they were so one of the things is yeah, is medically you're classed as an older adult when you're 65,
Wow.
because I know because that's when your body changes. That's when you start needing more protein, you need more calcium, you can have a bit of an issue with B vitamins. You need to be looking at stuff like sarcopenia, which is that kind of muscle loss that happens as you get older. So all these things, your gut begins to change, gets a bit slower. But nowadays, most people are still working at 65.
Yeah.
And if you say to anybody that they're an older adult at 65, they will shoot you.
Yeah. Literally will, yeah. And ladies and
But
gentlemen, boys and girls, we're talking about Glasgow, and that actually can happen.
but if you market it as over 50s, it kind of keeps everybody a bit happy. And also menopause for women, there's massive changes that can happen to their overall health and gut health. Women tend to fixate on more the aesthetic things that happen, but actually, your gut health can worsen. Your risk of dying of heart disease is actually the same as a gentleman, and actually twice as many women die of heart disease post-menopause as they do of breast cancer, which no one's talking about, you know. But I think to go back, so that's where that interest comes in. And also you get to manage, very often people as they get older gather more conditions, and you've got to balance everything together. So actually from a medical point of view, it's really interesting because you've got to make everything kind of tick along, and you've got to, it's the easiest way I say it to people is, if you watch 24 Hours in A&E, you can see them, they've got things, so they're not really caring about the fact he's got a broken ankle, they're more worried about what's happening in his insides. And that's pretty much what medicine's like. But I think when I went to work in Glasgow, so there's that side of things, but when I went to work in Glasgow, I was all based within the community, and it was all home visits. I didn't do any hospital work. So you're going into people's homes, and I just loved seeing their homes and seeing their pictures and hearing their stories about their lives. And I think I'm just really interested in people, and I find older adults really interesting. And I can remember as a wee girl going to visit all my, older relatives and aunties and things, and you'd be sitting there and the fire would be on because nobody had central heating in, farming communities at that point in time. Your front was roasted, but your back was freezing. Yeah, do you remember that?
I remember that, yeah.
And you went for a pee and the steam came out the toilet. But
yeah.
But you would sit there and they would get photograph albums out, and they would show you, photographs and explain things, and stories got passed on, and I just loved all that. I loved the storytelling aspect of it, and I loved hearing people's stories, and yeah, and just their wisdom, because they had so much wisdom. And I got really interested in why some people fared better in older adulthood than others, and and it's been a lot of work done on that. And it's basically, people that did things that, kind of activities that were also had kind of social aspect, or people that were in parts of clubs. So I don't think they really happen anymore. But things like line dancing and tea dancing and bowls is still a thing. Golf. I once saw a gentleman, he was 92 and he broke his hip ice skating. Him and his friends went every Friday to an ice skating rink in Glasgow, and he slipped and fell and broke his hip at 92, which was amazing.
Wow, incredible. Incredible. And you would have recognized that quite succinctly in terms of the farming community, where, farmers by their very nature are quite active, and it's quite physical. And certainly when I grew up in Ireland, you had an awful lot of older farms or elderly farmers looking after those farms, and they just seemed to be wound up like a dynamo, and off they went and did the thing. And I often wondered, what's the secret? And I remember my own next door neighbour, Jack, probably in his 70s. He just looked old when I was young, but it just seemed to have that oodles of energy and that oodles of strength, and he was built, as they say in Glasgow, like a brick shithouse. He was just built strong, And it was just incredible to watch him work and weave and do his tasks and work on his farm. And have we lost some of that, Fiona?
I think we probably have.
Yeah,
I think farmers are a distinct breed all to themselves. You know,
yeah.
they never retire. You know, for a
No,
start, they never retire. They just stop getting up to do the milk run in the morning, then they get put on to feeding calves and stuff. But I think we do. I think we maybe overthink things a wee bit too much now when
no.
it comes to, the fact of the matter is it's not sexy, dare I say that word, but good food, exercise, sleep, chatting to people, not keeping yourself isolated, getting out, talking to folk. These are all things that we've actually got the evidence there to show us. There's a great study done, and I'm rubbish at remembering, but there's a really good book called Age Proof, and I think it's Roseanne Kenny. I've got it somewhere.
Okay.
And basically it's called the Tilda study, and they've basically looked, and what they've discovered is the thing that will kill you quickest is loneliness.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's really important, and that's I think where these people, and also, the people that I discovered tended not to overthink things. They
Mm.
just, they were hungry, they ate. If they wanted a bit of cake, they had it, but they didn't stress about it. You know, um, and I think we've lost a lot of that simplicity sometimes.
Yeah, I know I've read similar studies, and I read a book called Ikigai, which is the study of longevity, really, and why in certain pockets of the world people were living longer. And there's been studies done and research done, and scientists have come into these areas, and they're particularly prevalent in some areas in Japan and Southeast Asia, and there's a kind of section of India that seems to have a predilection of older individuals into their 80s, into their 90s, and even I was going to say centurions, but people who live to beyond
Yeah,
the
yeah,
100. And um, it says quite clearly in the book, and you echo it in terms of what you've said there, that what keeps them going is that spirit of connection, that spirit of community, that spirit of activity, that spirit of interest and engagement and passionate about what they're doing, whether that be painting or gardening. Or I remember one story, in fact, from the book, where this elderly individual, let's just say the individual was 97, 98, but every day the bus used to pass his house and he used to come out and wave at the bus and wave at everybody passing. And that was him engaging, and people on the bus looked out for him every single day,
uh-huh.
and sometimes the bus would stop and the people would offer him gifts and, and go on their merry way. And that built that whole sense of connection. And that, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, that person lived to beyond 100, even 105 or 106. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So I mean, what's the secret sauce, Fiona? As
I don't
as
know, because
as
if I had that, I'd be living in Barbados.
you would be, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Having a conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't. I think. I think. Again, it's not going to be sexy, is it? I think
No, it
there's.
doesn't need to be sexy.
I know. I think there's the whole thing about your smoking, your recreational drugs, your
Yeah,
alcohol intake. No matter whatever you say, there is actually no safe limit for alcohol. It causes issues.
thanks for
No
that.
matter,
Thanks
yeah,
for
no
that.
matter how much you drink. But I think good whole foods. Your meat, potatoes, two veg. Not recognizing when you're full, not. I don't want to be, but kind of not overeating, not undereating, not underfueling, not thinking too much about it. So if you want to have something to eat, then go for it. I
Yeah.
think you need to feed your soul. So do things that you enjoy, connect with people, get off your phone. stop that endless mind-numbing scrolling, which we all do. Even me saying this can sometimes end up going down that dark hole.
Mm.
Moving your body every day in a way that you enjoy. It doesn't need to be heading down to the gym. If that's your thing, then great. If it's strength training, which you really should be doing once you get to kind of, our age. Um, you know, but and also like, I see so many people and they're out walking their dog and they've got their face stuck in a phone,
Yeah.
or they've got their podcast, or they've got their ear thing, they're listening to music. And fine if music's your thing. I like to go walk with the dog and actually look at what's going on round about me and look at, you notice the changes in the season, you notice the birds and different things like that. I don't think there's any magic in it. I think it's just all just quite simple, to be honest with you, Seamus.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. I mean, a lot of specialists would say that it happens and begins and ends in the gut, right? If our gut's right, then everything else follows from that. I mean, I read something even recently that 80% of all of our serotonin level is produced in the gut. And that was a big revelation for me. As
Yeah.
somebody, as somebody who takes citalopram on a regular basis for my anxiety, to know that 80% of my serotonin level begins in the gut. I'm questioning what I'm eating a little bit more, and if that's improving my mood level or if that's taking down my mood level. Is that kind of where it's at, Fiona?
Yeah, so the serotonin, so you're absolutely right about the serotonin, but the serotonin you make in your gut doesn't cross into your brain for a
Yeah,
start. So that's one of the things that's kind of common misconception. You're absolutely right. And actually the biggest thing that's happened in my career being a dietitian is understanding a lot more about the gut. And it's relatively new. When I say it's relatively new, it's like kind of 10 years old,
yeah,
10, 15 years old, but which actually in medical terms is really new because,
yeah.
um, but yeah, and the way that we can feed our gut isn't by buying these powders and, nicking back apple cider vinegar like a tequila shot on a Saturday night. And no, no, it's horrible.
Oh,
Um, it's actually about having fruits, vegetables, beans, pulses, seeds, nuts, herbs, spices.
yeah.
It's about, a good bowl of soup full of stuff in it. It's about getting your five a day, which, I think only 20% of the population actually do. Your gut loves fiber. So, again, beans, pulses, nuts, lentils, herbs, fruits, vegetables, all these things feed the bacteria in the gut. So you hear about people talking about the good bacteria in the gut, the bad bacteria in the gut, but basically we all have billions, if not trillions, of bacteria, fungi, viruses, yeast that inhabit our gut, and that is called your gut microbiome is as individual for you as your fingerprint.
Yeah.
So it's completely different. So that's why having things like probiotics, which is putting the bacteria in, they're actually a total waste of money unless you have a specific medical condition to deal with it. But actually, you need to almost cultivate and manage your own gut bacteria because that will be what you need. It's also got a role to play in your immune system. So if your gut is healthy, you have a good immune system. There's also implications for mental health. We're still needing a bit more research on that, though we're not entirely sure about it. But also nutrition it's complicated because you can't actually separate it from other factors in life. So if you have someone who has, got a depressive illness, the chances are they're unlikely to be thinking about getting their 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. They're unlikely to be thinking about how well balanced, about eating a variety of colours. They're
Yeah.
potentially struggling with things like, menu planning and, you know, and then you get so hungry that you end up eating, high carb, high fat foods because your body's craving some energy going in. So it's really complicated to kind of, and that's what makes it interesting as well.
Yeah.
It's just not, nutrition can't really just sit on its own. It's a whole kind of lifestyle thing that you've got to look at alongside it.
And it's interesting that you say there the gut microbiome is as unique to us as our fingerprint, and I presume diet would be similar. That no two diets are the same because we're all built slightly different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And your preferences are different to what you have. The biggest thing you can do for your health and nutrition is variety, is
Yeah.
getting plenty of variety. They say 30 plant points a week. That's come out of the American Gut Health Study.
Mm.
Um, so getting a different variety of things, eating a rainbow. There's lots of different ways you can look at it. Um, but the variety of the food and having lots of different colours, you're getting lots of different vitamins and minerals and polyphenols and you know, like I said, it doesn't need to be complicated or difficult. It does take a bit of planning,
Yeah.
but it's not complicated or difficult.
I know. I love your style, though, Fiona, because I know we've spoken before about this, and what you said to me previously is you equally don't need to be too rigid or religious when it comes to diet, right? And it's recognizing our own humanity as well. And sometimes we like the things we like, and sometimes we will, for example, eat fast food, and we will eat takeaways. But you make the point succinctly that. Yeah, you can have those, but not every single day for 7 days for a whole month, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's actually that's one of the things, I hate the word superfoods because, the moment you tell someone that something's particularly good for them, they fixate on that and they
Yeah.
eat more of that and exclude other things from their diet. And what we know is it's actually dietary patterns that the problem. So the whole thing around ultra processed foods, for example, which is another bit of a bugbear of mine, and it's been taken on by going to go on a limb here, very white middle class doctors that can afford not to buy processed breakfast cereals and things like that.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that white bread is fortified with iron, calcium, niacin, and thiamine. It's going to be fortified with folic acid as of next year. So it actually gives, and that's from the war, because pre-war we used to have brown bread. Brown bread was considered the bread of the affluent classes, and white bread was considered. So sorry, no, brown bread was the bread that was considered. It was white bread was for the affluent classes, and
That's
brown bread was for the workers.
yeah.
Basically, yep. And then during the war, that all changed. So they started fortifying things. Breakfast cereal, which is something again which is vilified a lot, is fortified with calcium, with B vitamins, and actually, we've seen a reduction in the amount of cereal that's been eaten. Subsequently, we've seen a reduction in these minerals, which is within the diet. So it's absolutely, but also people that potentially eat an awful lot of processed foods don't have their 5 portions of fruit and veg a day, don't have, and it's the context of the whole diet that's the issue. It's not the individual foods within the diet. And also things like, yogurt come under processed foods. The way it's kind of categorized is a bit rubbish, to be fair. It doesn't really, they've got to have some kind of system, but it's not great. Everybody knows you shouldn't be, living off of, your Greggs sausage rolls and Haribo sweets. No, nobody needs to be told that. They know that.
I love Greek sausage rolls. I absolutely love them, so I do. I don't have them all the time, but I'll be honest with you, right? And I suppose this is where the honesty factor comes in. I do when I'm on the road sometimes accidentally pop into Greg's and get a sausage roll when I'm on the road and it's just I mean, it's like manna from heaven, right?
Ah, well, I'm going to be honest. I like a sausage roll better than anybody, but there are better bakers that do sausage rolls than Greggs.
Oh, controversial. Controversial. Oh, you'll have the
Yeah.
sausage roll bakers now lining up for you to send you on gifts of their sausage roll.
You might actually. We might get a whole like line of sausage rolls. No, I like a sausage roll just as good as anyone, but yeah, no, Greggs I find quite greasy.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. The best sausage roll I ever tasted was not a Greg's one. It was actually from T-Base Services on the M6 heading north, which was just uh, farm food done as its very, very best. So natural, wonderful pastry, wonderful pork sausage, and just incredible. It's a meal in itself, an absolute meal in itself. Incredible. If you're heading on the M6 anytime soon, I'm not getting paid by TBA Services to say this, but their sausage rolls are absolutely spot on. Well done, TBA Services. I shall be with you in the next couple of weeks. Um, um, so it's not as simple as we would be led to believe, that it is a very complex, holistic picture, right, Fiona?
Yeah, yeah, I think it is. It it's simple, but it's complicated, I think, as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's also the impact, it's the interplay between all these things that's actually really important.
Yeah.
Between your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health. I mean, more often than not, I'm seeing, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, women, because it always seems to be women that are just, if they've got to midlife and they are struggling with kind of chronic diseases, menopause kicks in, they've got terrible gut issues. And, they're what they call the sandwich generation. We're having our family later in life. So you're potentially getting teenagers, you've got older adult children staying at home with you longer. You've got to work for longer now because they've increased the pension age from 60 to 67 just now, isn't it, for
Yeah.
women? And then you've got older parents that are living longer. And very often we don't have that community aspect we used to have. People are more spread now. That children go away to different countries or different parts of the country for work and different things. And we don't have that kind of community potentially that we used to have either, which is a challenge, and it's difficult in itself. So it is complicated.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not just about the foods that we consume, but it's actually the whole picture.
Yeah.
It's looking at your cupboards, it's looking what you're doing, it's looking what you're getting involved in, it's looking at your levels of activity, because it all interplays in the vessel that is us as human beings, right? It all
Yeah.
interplays. It all
Yeah.
has an effect.
Absolutely. And the other, I mean, I'm not an expert at all in the kind of socioeconomic, kind of structure of society, but
Mm.
food poverty is a real thing. I mean, I'm really lucky. I don't have to particularly worry about what I spend on a weekly shop, but that's not the same for everybody. I certainly notice that it goes up, and there's some weeks I'm like, right, come on, we're eating out the freezer this week, do because it does cost more money. So there are some people that and like some of my daughter's at secondary school, and so she's grown up with me. She's a real foodie. Wasn't always like that, but she is now. She's a real foodie. She can cook, she can bake, but there's a shortage of home economics teachers. So
Wow.
therefore, she didn't get any home economics in her first year at school. She got a little bit in second year, and then she dropped it.
Yeah.
But and because they haven't got the home economics teachers, if you've not come from a home where you've been taught how to cook and do things like that, school's not going to be there for you either, And if you don't have those basic life skills, so it's really kind of a really complex picture.
It is. It is. And I presume your business then, InspiritDiet.com, looks at that in a little bit of detail. And how do you work? How do you, if I came to you for advice as someone in his late 50s, what would you do with me? What would you say to me? Would you say you're a fine specimen now, there's nothing wrong with you, or
Well, I might very well say that.
thank
Um,
you.
so basically, well, first of all, it depends what you, because people come to me, they have a problem. Very
Yeah.
seldom people come just wanting to get better. So they usually have a
Mm.
medical condition, and that will dictate a kind of lot of what we advise. But you also look at, because you've got to, anyone can give you a list of, can give you a meal plan or a diet plan and send you on your way. But the issue with that is most dietitians will not most dietitians do not like giving out meal plans, because what that then does is that ties you to me. It doesn't actually give you the skills and the knowledge. And what we do is we work through to find out what your limiting factors are. What's going on in your life.
Mm.
If you are somebody who is busy all the time and maybe don't have time to cook, we might look at things like meal prep companies with you. Things like HelloFresh and Gusto and stuff like that can be really helpful for people that are really busy. But we would always try as much as possible to get you to to kind of meal plan and spend that time spend that time investing in yourself,
Mm.
you
Mm.
know, that and give you the skills to know, for example, if you've got gut issues, we would work with you to try and identify those trigger foods. If you've got things like high cholesterol, we would work with you to give you the knowledge of the things you should be including in your diet and the benefits for that, and
Mm.
also the practical tips and able, to allow you to implement them, recipe suggestions and that kind of thing. But we'd also look at, things like your stress levels, your mental health, your activity levels. And actually for doesn't seem to be, I think we're going to see a change for men coming up, this generation coming up now, but for women that have come up through the kind of, 80s, 90s diet culture, massive implications for that, and the massive implications that you have for women, kind of midlife women now that have always seen a mother going on diets, always criticizing her body,
Mm.
never wanting their photographs to get taken. It's huge. And then sometimes you deal with people who also have issues around food because they've maybe had a very chaotic childhood. They've maybe not known when food is going to come to them. They've maybe had to care for themselves.
Mm.
So there's a whole kind of bit that we dig in. And sometimes, we can dig so far as dietitians, and sometimes you uncover something and you have to say to someone, actually, you need to go and speak to someone that's more professionally trained to deal with this. We can go so far with it, um, but we can't always go the whole way with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
Yes,
it's a journey. You take people
it's absolutely a journey. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's a journey to get to where they want to be. And, I've got one of the best jobs in the world. I deal with a lot of people who have gut issues, and to have someone that's terrified of leaving the house to them booking a holiday to go and see their daughter in Thailand for Christmas. It's amazing. I had that privilege last year of working with a woman, and she'd actually booked herself a wee cheeky weekend in Mallorca or Tenerife or something in the interim because she felt able to do that now because she wasn't terrified of leaving the house. To give people their lives back, it's really it. There's no better gift, and you'll know that from the work that you do as well, Seamus. Mhm,
Absolutely, and that's why there's so much synergy between us,
mhm.
albeit we are different sides of the same scale. Because whilst I look at wellness and mental health, and you look at food and diet and wellness and mental health, it all interplays, and there's a wonderful synergy there because it's not just one thing; it's a combination of things that go to make up us as human beings and who we are and how we function, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. I was at a networking event the other day, and there was all these personal trainers, which dietitians and personal trainers have a bit of a love-hate relationship because
Yeah.
they go beyond their scope of practice and might a lot of them go beyond their scope of practice.
Mm.
And they were sitting there going, no, we offer a holistic point of view. And I'm like, yeah, and we've been doing that for, 30 years, pal. Well, doing that more. I mean, dietitians are relatively new in terms of healthcare.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that's what you should be doing to give someone good treatment. They shouldn't just be solely focusing on one aspect. They should be treating you as a person.
Absolutely, 100%. Fiona, we're coming slowly to the end, would you believe it or not, of our podcast episode. If people need to reach out to you and need to get in contact, where can they reach you, Fiona?
Probably the easiest place to reach me is on my website, which is www.inspiritdiet.co.uk. I'm also active on social media, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. But probably my website, because you can contact me directly. There's a WhatsApp button. You can book in for a discovery call. You can send me a message. My address is there. You can get in touch via carrier pigeon. You know,
Harry
I'm open
Pigeons
to
are
all of
brilliant.
them.
Yeah.
Put a note through my door. It's all fine.
Fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Fiona, it's been a huge pleasure today to have you on. As always, to be able to sit down and have a chat. I always feel I always feel more knowledgeable coming away from our conversations.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind.
And you've opened my mind a little bit more, particularly noting today that serotonin produced in the gut doesn't necessarily navigate its way to the brain. That's really helpful for me. You know, and it's, you know, these little nuggets of information and these little bits of information that help me, but help, you know, everyone to navigate their journey, their own food journey, and their own journey through health and wellness and good mental health. So I appreciate your journey, and I appreciate your honesty and authenticity today. And I think this has been, for me, I feel very empowered after listening to you.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, I am, and we've spoken about it already. You know, have we will have that date in the calendar where we will visit that establishment. You know, to knock off a couple of plates, right? And that
Yeah, and they do really good sausage rolls.
you know, look, I'm slavering again, on that. For those who don't know, Fiona sent a lovely picture of her holiday celebration, our birthday celebration, some weeks ago, and she went to a particular local destination, does an amazing afternoon tea, which is absolutely wonderful. And it allows you to make your own choices in terms of what you would like, in terms of sandwiches, cakes, and otherwise for your afternoon tea, to see the pictures, to understand what's involved, and now to know that they do amazing sausage rolls. Fiona, you know I'm there, right? You
Yep, I know
absolutely,
you're there.
you know I'm there. Watch this space coming to you very soon. Well, in the next 37 days, anyway, maybe not so, but once Easter's out of the way, we'll crack on. We will absolutely crack on.
Good
Fio-
plan.
Fiona Brannigan, it's been a real pleasure and honor to have you today. Thank you for your time. I wish you every success in terms of the mission and vision, value and purpose that you bring to humanity, in terms of the work that you do. And may you be blessed, and may you be enriched, and may those queries that you've got this week all turn into positive actions.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Seamus, for your time today and giving me the opportunity to speak to your listeners. I really appreciate it.
You're absolutely welcome. Have a great day, Fiona.
You too. Take care.